Hello, my dear. Thank you so much for joining me again today. As you can, I am not wearing my cloak today, just simply for ease of and see, I've been able to get some of my stuff back together after the move. So I hope you enjoy maybe a little bit more flavor from me. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It is truly wonderful to have you here with me. Please do let me know if there are any issues involving audio, as this is all meant for your comfort and enjoyment. Let me check something real quick for you. I think I fixed something that I noticed was happening. I think my audio was cutting out a little bit. Please let me know if this is better for your enjoyment. I always seem to be fiddling with my audio to see what gives you the best viewing audio experience, I suppose. Let me check this. Okay, so hopefully my words will not be cut out in the middle of the sentences now. I always have to adjust my volumes after doing a normal stream. If you were not here yesterday, I had actually streamed with a friend of mine, Amundal. I was using my normal voice for that. Well, at least my more conversational one, as speaking in this soft tone would not be completely compatible with the stream that we were having. Let me check and see how this is sounding for you real quick. Alright, I do believe that is acceptable. But once again, my dears, please let me know if there is something that is bothering you. Your comfort is what matters here today. And I suppose I can make myself a little bigger for today. Or perhaps just come a little closer. Hope you don't mind me coming up. But without much more further ado, I do believe I have promised you some more stories to entertain you with today. Hmm. Now let me see where we were. Hmm. I do believe I've recovered where we were. So, our first story for today is Bardarig in Donegal, attributed to a new name, attributed to Aditya McClintock. Hat Driver, the tinkerer, was a man well accustomed to a wandering life and to strange shelters. He had shared the beggar's blanket in smoky cabins. He had crouched beside the still in many a nook and corner where poteen was made on the wild Inishowen mountains. He had even slept on the bare heather or on the ditch, with no roof over him but the vault of heaven. Yet were all his nights of adventure tame and commonplace when compared with one special night. During the day preceding that night, he had mended all the kettles and saucepans in Moville and Greencastle, and was on his way to Culdaff when the night overtook him on a lonely mountain road. He knocked at one door after another, asking for a night's lodging, while he jingled the halfpence in his pocket, but was everywhere refused. Where was the boasted hospitality of Innishowen, which he had never before known to fail? It was no use to be able to pay when the people seemed so churlish. Thus thinking, he made his way toward a light and a little further on, and knocked at another cabin door. Hello, Looney Neptune. Thank you for coming in. Although I wonder why you use the disgusted emoji. An old man and woman were seated one at each side of the fire. "Will you be pleased to give me a night's lodging, sir?" asked Pat respectfully. "Can you tell a story?" returned the old man. "No then, sir, I cannot say I'm good at storytelling," replied the puzzled tinkerer. "Then you must just go further, for none but them can tell a story we'll get in here." This reply was made in so decided a tone that Pat did not attempt to repeat his appeal, but turned away reluctantly to resume his weary journey. "Story indeed," muttered he. "Old wives' fables to please the weans." He looked up his bundle of tinkering implements and observed a barn standing rather behind the dwelling house, and, aided by the rising moon, he made his way toward it. It was a clean, roomy barn, with a piled-up heap of straw in one corner. Here was a shelter not to be despised, so Pat crept under the straw and was soon asleep. He could not have slept very long when he was awakened by the tramp of feet, and, peeping cautiously through a crevice in his straw covering, he saw 4 immensely tall men enter the barn, dragging a body, which they threw roughly upon the floor. They next lighted a fire in the middle of the barn, and fastened the corpse by the feet with a great rope to a beam in the roof. One of them then began to turn it slowly before the fire. "Come on," said he, addressing a gigantic fellow, the tallest of the 4. "I'm tired. You be to take your turn." "Fax and troth, I'll no turn him," replied the big man. there's Pat Driver in under the straw. Why couldn't he take his turn? With hideous clamor, the four men called the wretched Pat, who, seeing there was no escape, thought it was his wisest plan come forth as he was bidden. Now, Pat, they said, you turn the corpse, but if you let him burn, you'll be tied up there and roasted in his place. Pat's hair stood on end, and the cold perspiration poured from his forehead. But there was nothing for it but to perform his dreadful task. Seeing him fairly embarked in on it, the tall men went away. Soon, however, flames rose so high, singed the rope, and the corpse fell with a great thud upon the fire, scattering the ashes and embers, and extracting a howl of anguish from the miserable cook, who rushed to the door and ran for his life. He ran on until he was ready to drop with fatigue, when, seeing a drain overgrown with tall, rank grass, he thought he would creep in there and lie hidden till morning. But he was not many minutes in the drain before he heard the heavy tramping again, and the four men came up with their burden, which they laid down on the edge of the drain. I'm tired, said one to the giant. It's your turn to carry him a piece now. Dykes and troth, I'll no carry him, replied he. But there's Pat Driver in the drain. Why wouldn't he come out and take his turn? Come out, Pat, come out, roared all the men, and Pat, almost dead with fright, crept out. He staggered on under the weight of the corpse until he reached Kiltown Abbey, a ruin festooned with ivy, where the brown owl hooted all night long, and the forgotten dead slept around the walls under dense, matted tangles of bramble and binweed. Hello, Game Crazy. My posture you needn't worry about, for it is impeccable, but I will take a hydration break for you. Thank you for your concern, my dear. No one ever buried there now, but Pat's tall companions turned into the wild graveyard and began digging a grave. Pat, seeing them thus engaged, thought he might once more try to escape, and climbed up into a hawthorn tree in the fence, hoping to be hidden in the boughs. And by the way, my dears, if there is any issues with the audio, please let me know. I'm tired, said the man who was digging the grave. Here, take the spade, addressing the big man. It's your turn. Spikes and trough. It's no my turn, replied he as before. There's Pat Driver in the tree. Why wouldn't he come down and take his turn? Pat came down to take the spade, but just then the cocks in the little farmyards and cabins round the abbey began to crow, and the men looked at one another. We must go, they said, and well it is for you, Pat Driver, that the cocks crowed, for if they had not, you just had been bundled into that grave with the corpse. 2 months passed, and Pat had wandered far and wide over the county Donegal, when he chanced to arrive at Raphoe during a fair. Among the crowd that filled the diamond, he came suddenly on the big man. How are you, Pat Driver? Said he, bending down to look into the tinkerer's face. You've the advantage of me, sir, for I haven't the pleasure of knowing you, faltered Pat. Do you not know me, Pat? Whisper. When you go back to Innishowen, you'll have a story to tell. Quite interesting that many of these within this story is similar to one of the last ones of the last story segment we had, both involving the home that you cannot stay in without telling a story, and then the large men trying to cook a corpse. Although in this one it seemed the corpse was truly dead and not sentient in his own right. They specifically said large men. Are they giants or trolls? But they were within a town. Cooking is something I'm about to do. Well, I hope you are able to make a wonderful meal for yourself, my dear. Our next story is called Taig of the Lee, attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. There have been many attributed to T. Crofton Crocker within this particular segment of myths. I would hope it wouldn't be a corpse, my dear. I can't stop in the house. I won't stop in it for all the money that is buried in the old castle of Cairngron. If ever there was such a thing in the world, to be abused to my face night and day, and nobody to for doing it. And then, if I'm angry, to be laughed at with a great roaring ho ho ho. I won't stay in the house after tonight. If there was not another place in the country to put my head under. This angry soliloquy was pronounced in the hall of the old manor house of Corrigan by John Shichan. John was a new servant. He had only been 3 days in the home, which had the character of being haunted, and in the short space of time he had been abused and laughed at by a voice that sounded as if a man spoke with his head in the cask, nor could he discover who was the speaker, or from whence the voice came. "I'll not stop here," said John, "and that's end the matter." Ho, 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 be quiet, John Sheehan, or else worse will happen to you. John instantly ran to the hall window, as the words were evidently spoken by a person immediately outside, but no one was visible. He had scarcely placed his face at the pane of glass when he heard another loud ho, 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 as if behind him in the hall. As quick as lightning he turned his head, but no living thing was to be seen. "Ho, ho, ho, John," shouted a voice that appeared to come from the lawn before the house. "Do you think you'll see Teague? Oh, never, as long as you live. So leave alone looking after him and mind your business. There's plenty of company to dinner from Cork to be here today, and 'tis time you had the cloth laid." "Lord bless us, there's more of it. Never stay another day here," repeated John. "Hold your tongue and stay where you are quietly, and play no tricks on Mr. Pratt, as you did with Mr. Jervois about the spoons." John Sheehan was confounded by this address from his invisible prosecutor, but nevertheless he mustered courage enough to say, "Who are you? Come here, and let me see you if you are a man." But he received in reply only a laugh of unearthly derision, which was followed by a "Goodbye. I'll watch you at dinner, John." "Lord, between us and harm, this beats all. I'll watch you at dinner? Maybe you will. 'Tis the broad daylight, so 'tis no ghost. But there is a terrible place, and this is the last day I'll stay in it. How does he know about the spoons? If he tells it, I'm a ruined man. There was no living soul could tell it to him but Tim Barrett, and he's far enough off in the wilds of Botany Bay now. How could he know it? I can't tell for the world, but What's that I see there at the corner of the wall? 'Tis not a man. Oh, what a fool I am. 'Tis only the old stump of a tree. But this is a shocking place. I'll never stop in it, for I'll leave the house tomorrow, and the very look of it is enough to frighten anyone. The mansion had certainly an air of desolation. It was situated in a lawn which had nothing to break its uniform level save a few tufts of narcissus and a couple of old trees coeval with the building. The house stood at a short distance from the road. It was upwards a century old, and time was doing his work with it. Its walls were weather-stained in all colors. Its roof showed various white patches. It had no look of comfort. All was dim and dingy without, and within there was a great air of gloom, of departed and departing greatnesses, which harmonized well with the exterior. It required all the exuberance of youth and of gaiety to remove the impression, almost amounting to awe, with which you trod a huge square ball, all placed among the gallery which surrounded the hall, or explored the long rambling passages below stairs. The ballroom, as the large drawing room was called, and several other apartments were in a state of decay. The walls were stained with damp, and I remember well the sensation of awe which I felt creeping over me when, boy as I was full of boyish life and wild and ardent spirits. I descended to the vaults. All without and within me became chilled beneath their dampness and gloom. Their extent, too, terrified me, nor could the merriment of my two schoolfellows, whose father, a respectable clergyman, rented the dwelling for a time, dispel the feelings of a romantic imagination until I once again ascended to the upper regions. John had pretty well recovered himself as the dinner hour approached, and several guests arrived. They were all seated at table, and had begun to enjoy the excellent repast, when a voice was heard on the lawn. "Oh ho ho, Mr. Pratt. Won't you give poor Teague some dinner? Oh ho, a fine company you have there, and plenty of everything that's good. Sure, you won't forget poor Teague." John dropped the glass he had in his hand. "Who is that?" said Mr. Pratt's brother, an officer of the artillery. That is Teague, said Mr. Pratt, laughing, whom you must often have heard me mention. And pray, Matt, Mr. Pratt, inquired another gentleman, who is Teague? Oh, you needn't worry about making my streams game crazy, but that is so very sweet of you to say. I would love to be able to join you on one of your streams one day as well. While we're here, if you are watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe if you wish to have more soothing book readings to enjoy. But only if you desire to do so. That, he replied, is more than I can tell. No one has ever been able to catch a glimpse of him. I had been on the watch for a whole evening with 3 of my sons. Yet, although his voice sometimes sounded almost in my ear, I could not see him. I fancied, indeed, that I saw a man in a white frieze jacket pass into the door from the garden to the lawn, but it could only be fancy. For I found the door was locked, while the fellow, whoever he is, was laughing at our trouble. He visits us occasionally, and sometimes a long interval passes between his visits, as is the present case. It is now nearly 2 years since we had heard that hollow voice outside the window. He has never done any injury that we know of, and once, when he broke a plate, he brought one back exactly like it. Oh, why thank you, Game Crazy. I appreciate the compliments to my voice. It is very extraordinary, said several of the company. But, remarked a gentleman to young Mr. Pratt, your father said he broke a plate. How did he get it without you seeing him? When he asks for some dinner, we put it outside the window and go away. Whilst we watch, he will not take it. But no sooner have we withdrawn than it is gone. How does he know that you are watching? That's more than I can tell. And either he knows or suspects. One day my brothers Robert and James with myself were out in Outback Parlor, which has a window into the garden, when he came outside and said, "Oh ho ho, Master James and Robert and Henry, give poor Teague a glass of whiskey." James went out of the room, filled a glass with whiskey, vinegar, and salt, and brought it to him. "Here, Teague," said he. "Come for it now." "Well, put it down then, onto the step outside the window." This was done, and we stood looking at it. "There now, go away," he shouted. We retired, but still watched it. "Oh ho, you are watching, Teague. Go out of the room now, or I won't take it." We went outside the door and returned. The glass was gone, and a moment after we heard him roaring and cursing frightfully. He took away the glass, but the next day the glass was on the steps under the window, and there were crumbs of bread in the inside, as if he put it in his pocket. From that time he was not heard till today. "Oh," said the colonel, "I'll get a sight of him. You are not used to these things. An old soldier has the best chance." And I shall finish my dinner with the swing. I'll be ready for him when he next speaks. Mr. Bell, will you take a glass of wine with me?" "Oh ho, Mr. Bell," shouted Teague. "Oh ho, Mr. Bell, you were a Quaker long ago. Oh ho, Mr. Bell, you're a pretty boy. A pretty Quaker you were, and now you're no Quaker, nor anything else. Oh ho, Mr. Bell. And there's Mr. Parks, to be sure. Mr. Parks looks mighty fine today, with the powdered head, and his grand silk stockings, and his brand new rakish red waistcoat. And there's Mr. Cole. Did you ever see such a fellow? A pretty company you've brought together, Mr. Pratt. Kiln-drying Quakers, butter-buying buckeens from Marrow Lane, and a drinking exciseman from the coal quay, to meet the great thundering artillery general, that is, come out of the Indies, and the biggest dust of them all. "You scoundrel," exclaimed the colonel, "I'll make you show yourself." And snatching up his sword from the corner of the room, he ran out to the window upon the lawn. In a moment, a shout of laughter, so hollow, unlike any human sound, made him stop, as well as Mr. Bell, who, with a huge oak stick, was close at the colonel's heels. Others of the party followed on the lawn, and the remainder rose and went to the windows. "Come on, Colonel," said Mr. Bell. "Let us catch this impudent rascal." "Ho ho, Mr. Bell, I am here. Here's Teague. Why don't you catch him? Oh ho, Colonel Pratt, what a pretty soldier you are to draw your sword upon poor Teague, that never did anybody harm." "Let's see your face, you scoundrel," said the colonel. Oh ho ho, look at me, look at me. Do you see the wind, Colonel Pratt? You'll see Teague as soon. So go in and finish your dinner. If you're upon the earth, I'll find you, you villain, said the colonel, whilst the same unearthly shout of derision seemed to come from behind an angle of the building. He's round that corner, said Mr. Bell. Run, run. You do not hear my neighbor's dog, I hope. They followed the sound, which was continued at intervals along the garden wall, but could discover no human being. At last both stopped to draw breath, and in an instant, almost at their ears, sounded the shout. Ho ho ho, Colonel Pratt, do you see Teague now? Do you hear him? Ho ho ho, you're the fine colonel to follow the wind. Not that way, Mr. Bell. Not that way. Come here, said the colonel. Ho ho ho, what a fool you are. Do you think Teague is going to show himself to you in the field? There. But Colonel, follow me if you can. You, a soldier. The colonel was enraged. He followed the voice over the hedge and ditch, alternately laughed at and taunted by the unseen object of his pursuit. Mr. Bell, who was heavy, was soon thrown out, until at length, after being led a weary chase, he found himself at the top of a cliff, over that part of the river Lee which, from its great depth, and the blackness of its water, had received the name of Hell Hole. Here, on the edge of the cliff, stood the colonel, out of breath, and mopping his forehead with his handkerchief, while the voice, which seemed close at his feet, exclaimed, Now, Colonel Pratt, now, if you're a soldier, here's a leap for you. Now look at Teague. Why don't you look at him? Ho ho ho, come along, you are warm, I'm sure, Colonel Pratt. So come in and cool yourself. Teague is going to have a swim. The voice seemed as descending amongst the trailing ivy and brushwood which clothes its picturesque cliffs nearly from top to bottom. Yet it was impossible that any human being could have found footing. Now, Colonel, have your courage, Have you courage to take the leap? What a pretty soldier you are. Goodbye. I'll see you again in 10 minutes above at the house. Look at your watch, Colonel. There's a dive for you. And a heavy plunge into the water was heard. The Colonel stood still, but no sound followed, and he walked slowly back to the house, not quite half a mile from the crag. Well, did you see Teague? Said his brother, whilst his nephews, scarcely able to smother their laughter, stood by. Give me some wine, said the Colonel. I never was led such a dance in my life. The fellow carried me all round and round till he brought me to the edge of a cliff, and then down he went into hellhole, telling me he'd be here in 10 minutes. 'Tis more than that now, but he's not come. Ho, 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 Colonel, isn't he here? Teague never told a lie in his life. But, Mr. Pratt, give me a drink and my dinner, and then a good night to all of you. For I'm tired, and that's the Colonel's doing. A plate of food was ordered. It was placed by John, with fear and trembling, on the lawn under the window. Everyone kept on the watch, and the plate remained undisturbed for some time. Mr. Pratt, will you starve poor Teague? Make everyone go away from the windows, and Master Henry out of the tree, and Master Richard off the garden wall. The eyes of the company were turned to the tree in the garden wall. The two boys' attention was occupied in getting down. The visitors were looking at them, and, ho, 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 good luck to you, Mr. Pratt. 'Tis a good dinner, and there's the plate. Ladies and gentlemen, goodbye to you, Colonel. Goodbye, Mr. Bell. Goodbye to you all. Brought their attention back when they saw the empty plate lying on the grass, and Teague's voice was heard no more for the evening. Many visits were afterward paid by Teague, but never was he seen, nor was any discovery ever made of his person or character. Well, I believe it's quite rude to force someone to show themselves if they do not wish to be perceived. I know many who wish to not be perceived. I'm looking at our next story now and trying to see if it is too long. So it seems like tomorrow we might actually finish the section of the leprechaun, the clear account in the FaeWorks, which will start up the section of the puka or fuka. Trying to see, because this next story is kind of big. And with the way things are looking, I believe I will stop it here for now, because tomorrow I do believe we will finish the section over the leprechauns and whatnot. Seems like we have 2 large stories and a smaller one to end up this chapter. Although this might be a little bit of a smaller segment, I believe it will end up quite nicely for the continuation of the stories. So, I shall put my cloak back on just as I leave, and thank you, always lovely listening to you. Well, thank you so much, Looney Neptune. It's always wonderful to know that this is a soothing experience for others. But without much further ado, I do believe that I will have to call it the end of the stream. And I do not see anyone who I know doing more soothing streams. In fact, the ones that I know are a little bit more chaotic. So I will not raid them and just end things here. But I want to thank you all so much for coming. It truly means the world to me to have you all come. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. And that means so much. I do hope you return and that my glimmer continues to enchant you to return to me. But until we next meet, I shall see you next time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until then, ta-ta, and rest well, my dears.